Today's tale begins, and I'd like to talk about what people consider min-maxing for your brothers in Battle Brothers. So I'd like to start off with first what skills, or basically talents, I consider to be the most important for each sort of position. So the way I consider the formation broken up is the front line here, which is everyone with a shield on the front. These guys are going to meet battle first. And then obviously I have my back line here with the old archers and also my two-handed weapons and my sergeant here who has the standard bearer. So for the front line, there's a couple of things that I'd like to talk about. Firstly is obviously your melee skill, your melee defense, and your fatigue. So I consider these three skills to be the most important for someone on the front line. Some people consider health. They go, well, I need hit points because I'm going to take hits. That is kind of a trap. So yeah, sure, you're gonna take hits, you're gonna get into your hit points, but later on in the game, your armor is basically your hit points. The better your armor, the more hit points you have, and the way you're gonna get to better armor is through fatigue. So some people might say pump hit points. I don't agree with that. I think that the three stats that you've got to pump are fatigue, melee skills, and your melee defense. So obviously melee skills, so that each time you do attack, you hit, or at least have a decent chance to hit. So that's the primary one I consider there. Melee defense. Your guys are on the front line, they're the one engaging hand to hand, right? So you've got a choice between melee defense and range defense. By the time the front lines clash, I'd consider range defense not significant. You can offset it somewhat through basically equipping a kite shield and getting an okay range defense. But your melee defense is really where it's going to be at. This is also increased a bit by the fact that my front line I also give the dodge perk just to help them out a bit. But melee defense, you're going to want to be avoiding getting hit, or you're going to want your shield taking the hit, and then it moves on to your armor. And then lastly, if you're really stuffed, it moves on to your hit points. By the time you get to your hit points, something's either beating the hell out of you, or something's gone terribly wrong, right? So the first two are melee skill, melee defense, and the last one is fatigue. Now fatigue, it lets you A, equip way better armor, B, it lets you do any of the actions that are required, specifically if you're going to be using a lot of your secondary abilities of your weapons. So I consider it pretty important on all your guys to be able to use their secondary attacks. So things like Lash to actually be able to hit opponents' heads. One of the good ones is actually Knockout, so that you can stun people and receive a lot less incoming hits. If you don't have enough fatigue, you're going to be either stuck on your basic attack, or you're just not going to be able to do anything at all. Sometimes, if you get to the end of the battle and you find you don't have enough fatigue, then you're just going to be hitting things once a turn, that kind of stuff. Even movement. Like, you want to get across that map and you're in a swamp, and you don't have the fatigue for it, you're just going to be crawling around, right? So those are the three skills I consider the most important. Secondary skills that I will put points into once my brothers get to a certain point is the old resolve here. Mostly because I want resolve to be at a reasonable level so that when they fight things like undead or geists, that my guys just don't flee off the battle. It still happens, even with the standard bearer rally at 50% here. I think old Janold here with his 41, he runs off the field all the time. And Ortwin, even at 56, I've had him run off the field from geists, just through their abilities. So I do pump skills into them. So we are talking about min-maxing here. So I consider the first three to be the most important. The melee attack, the melee defense, and the fatigue. But because RNG is what it is, right, you can get low rolls. At which point you have to make the decision whether you're going to keep pushing into your 3 primaries, or if one of the secondaries looks a bit better. So the only secondary, I consider health a slight secondary. If I ended up with someone who's super weak, like down in the 50s, I might bring them up to 55 or something, just so they can maybe survive a critical. I think one of these boys, do you have pretty low here? 51. You know, it's getting on the sketchy side. But mostly, I would be putting into melee skills, melee defense, just ignore him, melee defense, and fatigue. They're the only ways that you're really going to make your brothers better. Health is such a trap. It's such a trap, because you think you're getting a lot better out of it, but you're not really. Because by the time you get down to getting hit on your hit points, your armor's fallen off, you're in bad situation, right? Bad situation. So that's my front line. My back line is where it gets slightly different. So on my back line, if we look over here at Gisler, or however you pronounce his name, he comes in with ranged skill, because obviously he's using the ranged skill there. He gets ranged defense, and he gets fatigue. And the reason for these, and you can see he's actually got really low resolve, which is a slight problem. But the reason for using ranged skill, ranged defense, and fatigue is, obviously ranged skill determines how you're going to hit. And you always want to be hitting, right? Even if you're getting like negatives through having to shoot through multiple lines of stuff, or anything like that, shooting through trees. So this is your primary skill here. Secondary skill is ranged defense. Sorry, the next skill is ranged defense. So ranged defense is because you're not on the main line. So you're not going to be taking hits from any melee weapons unless something's gone pretty wrong. But the archers on the enemy team, they love to shoot at your archers. They love it. And the reason they love it is because they tend to get the best hits on these guys. The best percentages to hit. They also tend to have weaker armor on and so on because they're in the back line. So ranged defense is where you're going to want to put a bit more of your skills so that you can dodge those arrows coming in. And lastly, fatigue, once again, because you're going to want to be jamming on the armor. Also, you're going to want to be carrying as much as you can. So on these guys, he should actually have one of these. These guys are going to carry as much gear as they can. So he carries an axe because you basically, if you run out of ammo or you need a chance to chop down a shield, he's got the axe. He'll be on the second line. He can swing over the top. And I actually run with a kite shield here because what you can do is with quick hands, you can swap a kite shield in and out as you move. But these are the ones I consider to be primary, is the ranged defense. Pump all your skills into that. Your ranged defense to basically defend yourself, and fatigue so you can plop on the best armor you can onto these guys as well. Other skills, obviously resolve just so they don't break down and run. The other thing you can kind of do on these guys is you can pick initiative, but I don't tend to pick initiative because I don't really care when my guys go, because basically they're gonna survive the attacks that are incoming to them, and they're gonna dish out damage, and it's kind of like a sunk skill point because you don't really get ahead. I mean, the armor is dragging you down by quite a bit, as you can see. I mean, it goes from 83 to 65, and the more and more armor you pack onto these guys, the slower they get. The one thing I will say is with dodge, obviously any points you do stick into here does translate into more defense. So you do get a little bit out of it, but honestly, unless I'm rolling a 1 here and a 4 here, I wouldn't really pick anything for initiative. So we come over to the sergeant. My sergeant, he's a bit behind on things here, but he's getting there. So for the sergeant, I pick a mix between skills here. Sergeant's going to want the best armor he can get. So once again, you're going to want fatigue. He's going to want melee skills so he can at least hit. He does get a slight bonus to hit from the standard bearer here, from the old battle standard, sorry. So he does get 10% on top of that, so he doesn't have to have a massive melee skill. So at some point you can actually stop pumping melee skill, and you can start doing range defense, fatigue, and resolve. And the reason I change over to resolve here is your battle standard here, it gives a 10% bonus of this guy's resolve to 4 squares. So basically a large chunk of your guys, right? With that, not only are you pumping his, but you're basically making everybody else better on their resolve checks. Also, resolve comes in to give them not only do they not run, but they get better events out of actually killing things. So they go over to confident, and that basically lets them just hit so much better. So for the sergeant, I get his melee skills to an okay level, 74. I probably stop around here, and I keep going with ranged defense. Second line, he's gonna get shot in the face, right? Archers love the second line; they will just shoot into the second line all day. And the fatigue, so that I can basically just jam whatever armor I like onto him as he goes, and resolve. Those are the ones I pick here. And then lastly, I have the old two-hander here. He's relatively the same, but slightly different. So, melee skill always, right? Because you're always going to want to hit. Fatigue, because you're going to want to jam the best armor on him. And it gets slightly hard here because you want to kind of come across even. I'd say melee defense is more important because at some point, the reason I have a two-hander here is he's going to get into the front line at some point. And you do want defense because I don't really want to be swapping him out of the front line so much. He does come with range advantage, I think. Let's have a look. Reach advantage, sorry. He does come with reach advantage, so every hit he does deal out, he gets a slightly boost to his defense. But for this, I would suggest melee skills, a slight mix between range defense and melee defense. The reason for that is he will sit on the back line, but at some point he'll transition into the front line. So a bit more emphasis on melee defense though, because once you're in that front line, it's a free for all, real free for all. If you don't have a good enough melee defense and fatigue, so that he can just tank up into whatever armor he wants. So that's where I put all my skill points, right? But if we're talking true min and max here, we also want to talk about their backgrounds. So this group here, I haven't quite transitioned them into what I would call great backgrounds. I'm pretty far from a town, so I won't run over to a town. Actually, I will run over to a town, and I will show you some of the better backgrounds. So I've arrived in a town here, and I want to look at some actual backgrounds. So I go over here. Now, if we're talking early game, some of the best stats for your early game characters are the farmhands, wildmen, and brawlers. That's for your front line, right? So anyone who you're thinking of putting on your front line, they generally come along with the best stats for melee, which is what you want on your front line, basically. They'll also come along with, sometimes you'll get a little bit of melee defense, so that they can come out with the best baseline stats for your frontline units. Also for early game, if you're looking for someone to be on your back line with the bow or the archer, you're looking at hunters, bowers, and poachers. So they will give you best range stats for your back line. And then lastly, if we're talking late game, so we're talking late game and you want the best person to be on your front line, then for high tier, you're looking at Swordmasters, Retired Soldiers, and Sellswords, and Hedge Knights. They will generally give you your best stats for both for melee attack and melee defense. Now, I say all this because there's actually a spreadsheet floating around on Reddit that was created by a user called Holding the Baby, and he's actually pulled about 300 backgrounds. Well, there's not obviously he's pulled 300 recruitments and checked out what base stats they've gotten. And when I looked through that spreadsheet, and just from generally how I hire my people anyway, that's how it's worked out. So when you get to the late game, you basically, for replacement people, you're looking at Swordmasters, Retired Soldiers, Sellswords, and Hedge Knights. Anything else, it will work, but they won't come base as good. So if you had, say, a level 11 Swordmaster versus your level 11 farmhand without any stars on their talents or skills, then your Swordmaster is always going to be better. But then the game breaks down with your stars. So if I hire on this Wildman here, and let's go have a look at him. So you got to be careful when you're on hiring on people, right? So my Wildman here, he's come in with, you know, a bunch of stuff, right? He's got an Iron Jaw, he's sure-footing, all that kind of good stuff. He's come on with his stars as well. So if I say I hired 20 Sellswords, right? And I got one that had 3 stars here, 3 stars here, and 3 stars here. He would be a god of combat, right? God of combat. But you can also get a little screwed by RNG. So you could get no stars or stars somewhere else, like Resolve and that kind of stuff. And you'd just be stuffed. So you can see some of my guys, I've kept them because it's early game. They're what I got. But they're not the greatest min-max ever. So this guy, he's come across with 2 points in hit points. And what that basically means is the way stars work, with 2 star, well, let's start at 1 star. Okay, let's just start at no stars, right? A roll for the stats that you get upon level up, with no stars, you'll get between 2 and 4 points. It's random. So you could get 2 points, or you could get 4 points. And this is dependent on the skill as well. So if it's melee defense, melee skill, a regular skill would be between 1 and 3. But for things like Resolve, Max Fatigue, HP, it's between 2 and 4 for no stars. For 1 star, it basically makes you roll 1 better. So with 1 star on HP, you would get between 3 and 4. If it was on initiative, you get 4 and 5. Slightly different on each. And then on melee skill, you could get between 2 and 3. And then you can also get, so if you had 2 stars, you get less RNG into that. So on 2 stars for HP, we'd get 4. Just straight out 4. Or if we were looking at melee skills, we'd be getting 3 each time. And it gets even better with 3 stars. So it takes that roll that you would be getting at 2 stars and it adds +1. So instead of getting 3, you'd be getting between 3 and 4 for melee skill. 5 and 6 for initiative. 4 and 5 for fatigue and HP. So there's a couple of things that come in with min-maxing, right? There's the background. So depending on what point in the game you are and what you can afford. Late game, if you can afford those Swordmasters, happily buy them. If you're early game and you can't quite afford that, Wildmen, Farmhands, Brawlers, they'll come in pretty well. Then you're looking at what kind of stars they come in with. Whether they've come in with stars that are pretty good or not. I mean, you can see, let's see, one of my guys is pretty, yeah, this guy here, Torkel. He's come in with stars and resolve and hit points, and I've had to basically pump melee skills and melee defense through some pretty poor rolls, right? But he is level 9, so he's getting there, But yeah, that's the general gist of it. So if you're wanting to min-max, you have to pray to the RNG gods, because you can get all sorts of crazy stuff coming out. It's also supply and demand. I mean, I've just turned up to the biggest city here, right? And all I'm really looking at is low tier stuff, and it's day 100, you know. I would love some better things. And the other things you have to consider is what kind of backgrounds you want. So I've actually got a couple of people in here because I enjoy their backgrounds. So I've got a tailor in here. What else do I have in here? I've got someone else. Oh yeah, I've got the old bowmaker, and I got the messenger. So I did take a couple of people outside of what I should be, because A, there was a bit of a supply issue at the time I was buying them, or B, I just enjoy some of the other backgrounds because you get some different events. Alright, hopefully that answers any questions around how to build your company, and if you really want to go down that min-max path, what to look for and what to buy. And tune in next time for more tips and tricks from Battle Brothers. Hey guys, thanks again for watching. If you like what you've seen, hit that subscribe button or leave me a comment on anything you want to see in the future.